Hey everyone, Cassandra and Brandon here with Kabuki Strength, and today we're talking about how to get the most out of your RDLs. RDLs are one of my favorite accessory exercises. Uses for them is just to develop better glute and hamstring strength, but it's also great to just retrain the hip hinge, especially if you're someone who is coming back to lifting or returning to sport after an injury and you just need to regroove those motor patterns to make sure that you're optimizing and preparing yourself to handle load. So today we're going to demonstrate how to get the most out of your RDL, and we're also going to talk about a few different faults that we tend to see. The first one that I think is the biggest one that we tend to see is poor dissociation of lumbar spine and hips. So what does that mean? It means that you can't consciously move or isolate lumbar flexion and lumbar extension from hip extension and hip flexion. So as a fault in the RDL, what we end up seeing is people either starting in a hyperextended position or a rounded position, and they end up moving the weight with their spine instead of their hips.
Yeah, let's show them, Cass.
Right.
So the first one that Cass talked about, all those fancy words to say that you move your back too much when you move your hips. So what we're going to train Cassie to do here is actually hinge back with her hips. Now there's a few cues that we like for that. My favorite one, Cassie might have a couple. My favorite is to think about reaching with your hamstrings back. So we find that one of the first things people do is they try to really find a position backwards, but they don't really think about how they get there. So a cue that you can work on to improve that back movement that Cassie just mentioned is to reach with your hamstrings. Want to show them what it looks like, Cass? That's what a pretty good one looks like. Let's show a bad one. It's pretty subtle here, guys, but you notice that the first hinge that Cassie makes is actually at that lumbar spine. That's what we're trying to avoid here. Now, it might not seem that problematic in an RDL, but that's going to be terrible for your conventional deadlifts, your sumo deadlifts, as well as your squat, because the more that your spine bends, your energy transfer in the actual movement is actually going to be reduced because your body has to guard against different positions. The next fault that we're going to have here is pushing the knees a little bit too far forward. So if you struggle with your hip flexion or pushing your hips back in a hip hinge, it is very likely that you are also somebody who pushes your knees too far forward. Show them what it looks like there, Cass. It's almost like a squat. And realistically, the knees should bend in an RDL, but they should only bend to the degree necessary to allow maximum hip flexion or a hip hinge. Is your grip getting tired?
Yeah.
The final fault that we're going to talk about is straightening your legs too much, turning this into kind of a stiff leg deadlift. Now, it's not the end of the world to do here, but again, you're probably not going to move the most amount of weight that you could in an RDL. Go with your legs straight here, Cass.
That's hard.
Yeah, you feel a little bit of neural tension there, I'm sure. The way that I prefer to have my athletes do RDLs is to, one, start from a rack. Find that starting from a rack allows them to hit a little bit of a better position to begin with, and I also want them to have the bar over their midfoot. So one of the common instruction points for many people is to bring the bar really close to your body in an RDL, which I don't think is inherently bad. However, if you want to recruit your hamstrings a little bit more by bringing that bar a little bit further away from your center of gravity is going to recruit your hamstrings much, much more. So you might not be able to go quite as heavy with that little bit of a gap, but I think the benefit of greater hamstring recruitment is going to trump keeping it super close to your body. Now, from a practical standpoint, we love RDLs for people who struggle to get enough volume in for their lower body, whether it be for back problems or just general recovery issues. It's a great way to stack on volume to your normal deadlift training and do probably 5 times the amount of work you could otherwise in a conventional deadlift, good morning, or something of that nature.
So summary, use your hips and not your low back. From our good friend Dr. Stuart McGill, being able to improve that control and conscious control of whether you can flex at the lumbar spine and flex at the hips. Same with rotation, and rotation